Daniel and Claire had been married for 17 years, and though they loved each other deeply, life had grown quiet between them. Their days followed a comfortable rhythm. Early mornings with coffee on the porch, long work hours, and peaceful evenings spent with soft music and a glass of wine. It wasn't unhappiness, just stillness, the kind that comes after years of knowing someone so well that words aren't always needed. But lately, that silence had started to feel heavy. Claire often looked at Daniel and wondered when they had stopped laughing so freely, stopped going out just for the joy of being together. One Thursday evening, as she was scrolling through her phone, a message popped up that would shift something inside her. It was from Mia, a young woman they had met a year ago during their anniversary trip to Lake Michigan. "Hey, this is Mia. We met at the lake last summer. Jake and I are having a small dinner this weekend. You two should come." Claire smiled when she read it, remembering Mia's easy laughter and Jake's kind energy. They were a younger couple, maybe 10 years behind them, full of curiosity about everything. Claire hesitated before showing Daniel the message. He was sitting by the window reading the news on his tablet. When she told him about the invitation, he looked up with mild surprise. "Mia and Jake, the ones we met on that hiking trail." She nodded. "They were sweet," he said slowly. He wasn't the spontaneous type anymore. His comfort zone was routine. But he saw something in her expression, something lighter, hopeful, almost playful, and it stirred a feeling he hadn't seen in her in a while. "All right," he said finally, setting down his tablet. "Let's go." Claire's eyes lit up and she smiled. That same smile that used to make him forget everything else. Saturday arrived faster than expected. Claire spent extra time getting ready. Not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she hadn't had a reason to dress up in months. She chose a soft blue dress Daniel had always liked. When she came out of the bedroom, he looked up and couldn't help but stare for a moment. "You look beautiful," he said simply. It was a quiet compliment, but it meant more than he realized. They drove through the city as the sun dipped below the skyline, talking about little things. The music on the radio, the smell of rain in the air, the memory of that trip where it all began. There was a strange excitement in both of them, like the first day of something, though neither said it aloud. When they arrived at Mia and Jake's townhouse, laughter spilled out before the door even opened. The younger couple greeted them warmly, Mia with a hug that felt genuine, and Jake with an easy grin. "We're so happy you came," Mia said. The living room was cozy but alive with color. Candles flickered, music played softly, and the smell of roasted herbs drifted from the kitchen. Claire immediately felt lighter, as if she'd stepped out of her everyday life into something brighter. As the evening began, they shared stories about travels, books, and simple dreams. Jake talked about wanting to open a small coffee shop by the lake, while Mia described her art studio that doubled as a community space. They spoke with a kind of passion that reminded Daniel and Claire of who they used to be, full of ideas and not yet worn by time. As they ate, Daniel found himself laughing easily, listening to Jake's stories and even sharing a few of his own from when he and Claire first started dating. There was no pressure, no awkwardness, just warmth. The energy in the room seemed to wash away years of stillness between him and Claire. Every time he glanced at her, she was glowing, eyes bright, cheeks flushed with laughter. He realized he'd missed that version of Claire, one who was alive in every moment. After dinner, they all moved to the porch. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and the night air felt cool and clean. They talked about everything and nothing, the way people do when they feel comfortable. Mia leaned on Jake's shoulder. Claire rested her head lightly against Daniel's arm. The scene was simple, but something about it felt rare, almost sacred. It wasn't romantic in a wild or forbidden way. It was emotional, human. It was about connection. Daniel looked at the young couple and saw a reflection of their past. Those early years when every dream felt within reach. And yet, as he looked at Claire beside him, he understood something deeper. Love wasn't about chasing the same excitement forever. It was about remembering how to find it again, even after life had quieted down. The night stretched softly around them, filled with laughter, stories, and the unspoken bond of four people sharing a single meaningful moment. Claire smiled at Daniel as Mia poured another round of tea. And in that look, something unspoken passed between them. An acknowledgement that this simple invitation, this night shared with a younger couple, had already begun to awaken something they'd both quietly missed. It was only a dinner, yet it felt like the start of rediscovering each other in a world they thought they already knew. Mia and Jake's home felt alive the moment Daniel and Claire stepped inside. Music floated through the air, soft but full of warmth, and the smell of garlic and herbs drifted from the kitchen. Candles flickered across the table, casting a golden light that made everything feel cozy and inviting. Claire immediately noticed how much love had gone into the space. The little plants by the window, the photos of the two of them laughing at the beach, the handmade art hanging on the wall. Mia came over with that same spark in her eyes from the day they met. "You made it," she said, giving Claire a warm hug. Jake followed, shaking Daniel's hand with genuine energy. "It's so good to see you both again," he said. Daniel smiled politely, but inside felt a bit out of place. It had been a long time since they'd been around people so full of life. Claire, though, seemed to blend right in, asking about the food, complimenting the table setting, laughing easily. Dinner started with homemade soup, and soon the four of them were talking as if they had known each other for years. Jake shared stories about his plans to open a small coffee shop near the lake. He spoke with so much excitement that even Daniel, usually quiet, found himself leaning forward, asking questions. Mia talked about her art studio and how she wanted it to be a space for young artists to create without fear. "It's not about making money," she said, her hands moving as she spoke. "It's about making something that feels alive." Claire watched her with admiration. There was something refreshing about being around people who still believed in possibility. It reminded her of when she and Daniel were younger, when they used to talk about dreams late into the night. Between bites and laughter, Daniel began to feel lighter. For the first time in a while, he wasn't thinking about bills, deadlines, or the quiet distance that had crept into his marriage. He was just there, present. Claire noticed it too. She caught him smiling at something Jake said and felt a small tug at her heart. This was the man she'd fallen in love with years ago. Thoughtful, curious, and quietly charming. It struck her that sometimes love didn't fade. It just got buried under the noise of everyday life. Mia poured more wine, and the conversation shifted to stories about their favorite memories. Jake told a funny one about getting lost on a road trip, and Claire shared how Daniel had once driven through a snowstorm just to bring her coffee when they were dating. Mia sighed dreamily. "That's real love," she said. Daniel chuckled, embarrassed but proud. "It's just what you do," he replied. But inside, he felt something stir, a reminder of the small gestures that used to come so easily. As the plates were cleared, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The energy softened, the laughter quieted, and the four of them moved to the porch outside. The night was cool, the sky faintly glowing from the city lights, and the sound of crickets filled the silence between their words. Mia leaned against Jake, and Claire rested her head gently on Daniel's shoulder. For a few moments, no one spoke. It wasn't awkward, just peaceful, the kind of silence that felt shared rather than empty. Then Jake said quietly, "You two seem so calm together, like nothing shakes you." Daniel looked at him, unsure how to respond. "Calm doesn't mean easy," he said finally. "It just means we've learned when to speak and when to stay quiet." Jake nodded slowly, as if he understood more than his ears should allow. Mia smiled softly. "That's beautiful," she said. Claire turned to her, her tone thoughtful. "Marriage isn't about never fighting or never getting tired," she said. "It's about choosing to keep showing up even when it's not exciting." Mia listened, her expression tender. "That sounds comforting," she said, "like love that lasts." Daniel reached for Claire's hand without thinking. She squeezed it back, and in that quiet gesture, everything they hadn't said in months was understood. The porch light flickered slightly as a breeze swept through. And for a second, Daniel thought about how strange and wonderful it was that two strangers could make them remember how to feel again. The night continued gently, filled with stories, jokes, and the kind of honesty that comes when people stop pretending. They talked about growing older, about dreams that change shape, and about how love looks different with time. Jake admitted that he sometimes worried he and Mia would lose their spark. Claire smiled knowingly. "You will," she said simply, "but then you'll find it again." That's how it works. The younger couple listened carefully, their faces open and thoughtful. Daniel saw them, and for the first time, he realized how far he and Claire had come. Not perfect, not always romantic, but real. As the evening began to fade, the city lights shimmered below like a quiet ocean. Mia brought out mugs of tea, and they all sat together. The air filled with that soft warmth that only comes from connection. When Daniel caught Claire's eyes across the small table, he saw something familiar. Not the spark of new love, but the steady glow of something deeper. They didn't need to say anything. The night had already spoken for them. When they finally stood to leave, Mia hugged Claire tightly and whispered, "You too give me hope." Claire smiled, touched. "Hold on to each other," she said softly. "Even when life feels ordinary, that's when love really counts." As Daniel and Claire walked to their car, the sound of laughter still echoed behind them. Daniel glanced at Claire and said quietly, "That was nice." She nodded, her voice calm but full of feeling. "It was more than nice," she said. "It felt alive." They drove home in silence, the city lights reflecting off the windshield, both lost in thought. The night hadn't been dramatic or grand, but something had changed. It had reminded them that connection, whether with each other or with new friends, was what made life warm again. And as they turned down their quiet street, Claire reached for his hand, and this time he didn't let go. The night deepened as rain began to fall, soft at first, then steadier, tapping gently on the porch roof. The four of them didn't move inside right away. Instead, they stayed where they were, wrapped in the calm rhythm of the moment. The conversation shifted from light and playful to something more thoughtful. It was Mia who broke the silence first. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice almost drowned by the rain. "How do you stay together for so long and still seem close?" Claire looked at her, surprised by the question. But there was no judgment in it, just genuine curiosity. She smiled gently. "You don't always stay close," she admitted. "Sometimes you lose your way for a while, and sometimes you find it again. The trick is not to stop trying." Jake nodded slowly, glancing at Mia, his expression softening. "We fight sometimes," he said. "Not about big things, just little stuff that turns into bigger stuff." Claire understood that well. She had lived through enough of those quiet arguments that stretch across days without a single harsh word, just silence that feels louder than shouting. She leaned forward slightly, her voice warm. "That's normal. Every couple fights, but love isn't about winning or losing. It's about learning how to stay kind even when you're tired." Daniel had been listening quietly, watching Claire as she spoke. Something about her words touched him. He realized how much he had carried over the years. Her patience, her calmness, her ability to keep their world together when he'd been too distracted by work or worry. He hadn't said thank you in a long time. As he looked at her, he saw not just his wife, but the woman who had shared everything with him, the laughter, the tears, the dull, ordinary days. A flash of lightning brightened the sky for a second, and in that brief glow, Daniel caught Mia's face, her eyes glistening with emotion. "It's scary sometimes," she whispered, "loving someone so much that you're afraid of losing them." Claire gave a small, understanding nod. "It is scary," she said softly, "but that's what makes it real." The wind picked up and a sudden clap of thunder rolled through the distance. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out. For a moment, everything was dark except for the candles that Mia had placed earlier on the table. The soft golden light filled the room, making their faces glow. It was quiet except for the rain and their breathing. Jake laughed nervously. "Well, that's one way to set the mood," he joked, but his voice carried a tenderness that wasn't there before. Mia smiled and leaned closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder. Claire reached out to touch Daniel's hand, and this time, he didn't hesitate. Their fingers intertwined naturally like they used to when they were young. With the power gone, they all moved inside, bringing the candles to the living room. The storm outside felt far away now, almost soothing. They sat close together, sipping the last of their tea, and the conversation grew quieter, more personal. Jake asked Daniel what the hardest part of marriage had been. Daniel thought for a moment before answering. "The hardest part," he said slowly, "is when love changes. And you think it's gone, but it's not gone. It's just different. You stop chasing the fireworks and start appreciating the quiet glow." His words lingered in the air. Mia nodded, wiping a small tear from her cheek, though she tried to hide it with a smile. Claire watched Daniel as he spoke, and something in her chest loosened. It had been so long since she'd heard him speak about love like that. She remembered the early years when he'd write her small notes or take her on surprise drives just to watch the sunset. Life had gotten busier, and those gestures had faded. But sitting there now in candlelight with rain all around them, she felt the same quiet safety she'd felt the first time he held her hand. She leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You still make it sound simple." He smiled faintly. "Mm-hmm. It's not simple," he said, "but it's worth." Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. The thunder was now just a distant hum. Mia looked around the room, her voice breaking the peaceful silence. "You know," she said, "I always thought love was supposed to feel exciting all the time, but listening to you both, it sounds calmer, steadier." Claire nodded. "It becomes calm," she said. "The excitement changes into something stronger. The rush fades, but what stays is the comfort of knowing someone truly sees you," Daniel added quietly. "And still chooses you." Those words hung in the air, wrapping around them like the warmth of the candlelight. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The storm had become just a soft whisper outside. It felt as though time had slowed, as if the world beyond that little room didn't exist. Each of them was lost in their thoughts. Mia thinking of the future she wanted with Jake. Jake realizing how fragile and beautiful commitment could be. Claire remembering the young love that had turned into something deeper. And Daniel understanding how easy it was to forget to say thank you for that kind of love. When the power finally returned, none of them seemed eager to move. The candles still burned softly, and the room was filled with a strange, beautiful stillness. Mia broke it with a quiet laugh. "I think we just had the most romantic blackout ever," she said. Everyone laughed, and it was genuine light and full of warmth. Daniel and Claire shared a look that said everything. No grand gestures, no fireworks, just quiet connection reborn in the middle of an unexpected night. As the storm faded completely, they all stood together watching the rain drip from the porch roof. The air felt clean, the kind of air that comes after a storm full of promise and renewal. Mia reached for Jake's hand, and Claire felt Daniel's arm wrap around her shoulders. In that soft, simple moment, all four of them understood something they couldn't quite put into words. That love in all its forms was not about perfection or excitement. It was about showing up through the storms, through the quiet, through the years. And as the candlelight flickered out, the night left behind a quiet truth. Even love tested by time could still feel new again. Morning came with a soft golden light streaming through the windows, touching everything in the living room where the candles had burned low through the night. The storm was gone, leaving behind that fresh smell that follows rain, a mix of earth and new beginnings. Mia was already in the kitchen when Daniel and Claire woke up, moving quietly as she prepared breakfast. Jake joined her, his hair messy, his voice low as he hummed a tune that drifted between them. The sound of laughter soon filled the air again, light and unguarded, and Claire couldn't help but smile. The night before had felt intimate, not in a romantic way, but in a way that stripped every one of their masks. It was rare, she thought, to share such honesty with people you'd only known for a short time. Daniel came beside her, his voice soft. "I haven't felt that peaceful in a long while," he said. She turned to look at him and nodded. Me neither. There was something different in his tone, something lighter, almost young again. Breakfast was simple, pancakes, fruit, and hot coffee, but it felt like more than just a meal. It was a moment of gratitude. They talked about small things, travel plans, favorite books, and funny stories from the night before. No one mentioned the deeper conversations that had happened during the storm. Um, but the weight of them lingered in the air like a secret they all quietly shared. Mia, cheerful as always, placed a stack of pancakes on the table and said, "You two made last night special." "I didn't know we needed that talk until we had it," Claire smiled. "Neither did we," Jake raised his mug. "Two unexpected nights," he said with a grin, and they all raised their cups in agreement. After breakfast, they lingered in the living room. The sky outside was pale blue sunlight reflecting off the wet pavement. Daniel looked at a photo on the wall. Mia and Jake on a hiking trail, smiling arms around each other. "You remind me of us," he said thoughtfully. "Back when everything was about possibilities." Claire laughed softly. "You make it sound like we'll lose that someday." Daniel shook his head. "Not lose, just change. But if you're lucky, it changes into something deeper." Mia listened carefully, her smile fading into something softer. "You two really make marriage sound like a story," she said. Claire chuckled. "It is a story. You just have to keep writing it, even on the days when nothing exciting happens." They all sat quietly for a moment, listening to the sound of the wind brushing against the windows. It wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Daniel glanced at Claire and she caught his look. In that small exchange, there was something unspoken, a promise that they'd keep trying, that the comfort they'd rediscovered would not fade once they left this house. The silence broke when Mia stood up, smiling again. Well, we'll have to do this more often, she said. Maybe next time no power outage, though. Everyone laughed. They helped clean up together, packing away dishes and wiping the table. It was ordinary, but there was a quiet joy in it, the kind that comes when people feel connected. When it was time to say goodbye, the mood turned tender. Mia hugged Claire tightly, holding her for a moment longer than usual. You make me believe that love doesn't have to fade, she said softly. Smiled, touched by the sincerity. It doesn't, she said. It just changes shape. Jake shook Daniel's hand firmly. Thanks for last night, he said. You reminded me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. Daniel nodded. It's never perfect, he said, but it's worth it. Mia waved as they stepped outside, her voice light. Come back soon. As they walked to their car, the air smelled fresh, the sky clear and open. Daniel glanced back at the house, then at Claire. That was a good night, he said. Different but good. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It was more than good, she said quietly. It reminded me why we started all this in the first place. He nodded, starting the car. Let's not wait another 17 years to talk like that again. She laughed softly. Or to go to dinner parties. They drove through the quiet streets, passing rows of glistening trees and puddles catching the sunlight. The radio played softly, but neither of them spoke for a while. It wasn't silence filled with distance anymore. It was peaceful. Full stop. As they crossed the bridge that led back into the city, Claire turned to him. Do you ever think we got too comfortable? She asked. He thought for a moment. Maybe, he said, but comfort isn't bad. Sometimes you just need to shake it up a little. She nodded, looking out the window at the passing skyline. That night did more than shake things up, she said quietly. It reminded me that we're still capable of feeling new things even after all these years. Daniel reached over and took her hand. We are, he said, and I think that's what love really is, finding new moments in old stories. The car moved steadily along the highway, sunlight flickering through the trees. The world felt simple again. Claire squeezed his hand gently, and he smiled. That small, honest smile that said everything she needed to hear. When they reached home, the house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Something inside them had shifted. The quiet between them was no longer heavy. It was filled with understanding. Claire walked to the kitchen and began making another pot of coffee, a small routine they shared every morning. Daniel joined her, placing 2 mugs on the counter. He looked at her for a long moment before saying, we should invite them over sometime. She smiled. We will, she said. But for now, let's just enjoy this. They sat together at the table, sipping their coffee, sunlight warming their faces. The day moved slowly, peacefully. Neither felt the need to fill the space with words. They didn't have to. What they had rediscovered wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, strong and steady. It was the kind of love that stays. And as they looked at each other over the rim of their cups, they both knew that the night shared with that younger couple had been more than just fun. It had been a reminder of everything they still were and everything they could be again.